Jake had been staring at the same page of his astronomy textbook for 20 minutes. The coffee shop around him buzzed with the usual evening crowd, students cramming for exams, couples on dates, and locals catching up over lattes. But Jake's mind kept wandering from the complex equations about distant planets to the empty chair across from him. 3 months ago, that chair belonged to his girlfriend Katie. They used to meet here every Tuesday evening, sharing stories about their classes and planning weekend adventures. Now Jake sat alone, trying to focus on his graduate research while fighting off the loneliness that had become his constant companion. He glanced at his phone. Another missed call from his roommate Tom, probably wondering where he was again. Jake had been spending more and more time at the coffee shop lately, finding it easier to concentrate away from his empty apartment. The familiar hum of conversations and the smell of fresh coffee somehow made the complex world of space science feel more manageable. "Excuse me, are you studying planetary detection?" Jake looked up to see a woman standing beside his table. She had striking features, pale skin, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and the most unusual silver jewelry he'd ever seen. The necklace looked like it was made of interconnected geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change as she moved. Yeah, Jake replied, closing his textbook slightly. "I'm working on my thesis about finding planets outside our solar system." "Fascinating," she said, her eyes lighting up with genuine interest. "The Kepler method, or are you exploring newer detection techniques?" Jake blinked in surprise. Most people glazed over when he mentioned his research, but this woman seemed to actually understand what he was talking about. "Both, actually. I'm comparing the effectiveness of different approaches. Mind if I sit? I'm Luna. By the way," she gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Jake? And sure, go ahead." He moved his papers to make room, curious about this unexpected conversation. Luna settled into the chair with fluid grace, pulling out a leather notebook that looked well-worn and filled with intricate drawings. Jake caught glimpses of complex geometric patterns and what appeared to be mathematical equations, but in symbols he didn't recognize. "I've always been fascinated by the search for other worlds," Luna said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "There's something poetic about looking up at the stars and wondering who might be looking back." Jake found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. "That's exactly why I got into this field. Most people think it's just about math and data, but there's this incredible sense of wonder to it all. Wonder, yes, but also responsibility." Luna's expression grew more serious. "What if we're not just looking for them? What if they're already here, waiting for us to be ready?" The comment struck Jake as odd, but he attributed it to the kind of philosophical thinking that attracted many people to astronomy. "Well, the chances of intelligent life existing somewhere else are pretty high, statistically speaking, but the distances between stars make contact incredibly unlikely." Luna smiled, but there was something almost secretive about it. Distance is relative. What seems impossible to us might be simple to a more advanced civilization. The conversation continued for over an hour. Luna demonstrated a surprising depth of knowledge about theoretical physics, space-time mechanics, and even some cutting-edge research that Jake was sure hadn't been published yet. She spoke about concepts that were barely discussed in graduate-level courses, explaining them with the ease of someone who had spent years studying the subject. "You seem to know a lot about this stuff," Jake said, genuinely impressed. "Are you a professor somewhere?" "I'm part of a research collective," Luna replied vaguely. "We study things that mainstream science isn't quite ready to accept yet." Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Tom asking if he was okay. He quickly typed back that he was fine, then looked up to find Luna watching him intently. "Girlfriend?" she asked. "Roommate. He worries when I'm out late." Jake felt a slight flush of embarrassment. "I've been spending a lot of time here lately." "Sometimes we need space to think clearly," Luna said softly, "especially when we're on the verge of understanding something important." There was something in her tone that made Jake look at her more carefully. Her eyes held an intensity that was both attractive and slightly unsettling. She seemed to be studying him as much as she was talking to him. "You know," Luna continued, I think you'd be interested in meeting some of my colleagues. We have gatherings where we discuss ideas that go beyond traditional academic boundaries. What kind of ideas? The kind that could change how we see our place in the universe. Luna reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper. She wrote something on it in flowing script that looked almost like artistic calligraphy. We're having a small gathering tomorrow night, nothing formal. Just curious minds sharing theories and observations. Jake took the paper, trying to decipher the elegant handwriting. The address was clear enough, but there were additional symbols that looked like they might be decorative elements or possibly another language entirely. What's this other writing? He asked, pointing to the symbols. Oh, that's just a personal notation system I use, Luna said quickly. The important thing is the address and time, midnight. If you're interested, midnight, that's pretty late for an academic discussion. Luna's smile returned, but this time it seemed almost mischievous. The best conversations happen when the world is quiet and minds are open. During the day, we're too distracted by ordinary concerns to see the bigger picture. Jake felt a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. The rational part of his mind recognized several red flags. The late hour, the vague descriptions, the mysterious symbols. But another part of him, the part that had been lonely and isolated for months, was drawn to the possibility of connecting with people who shared his passion for understanding the universe. I don't know, he said hesitantly. I'm not really into group meetings and stuff. I understand, Luna said, standing and gathering her things. But sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we step outside our comfort zones. She paused at the edge of the table, looking down at him with those intense eyes. You know, Jake, I have a feeling you're meant for something more than just writing papers about distant planets. Some people are chosen to be part of something bigger. Before Jake could ask what she meant, Luna had walked away, leaving him alone with his textbooks and a growing sense that his quiet, predictable life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. He stared at the paper in his hands, reading the address over and over. The responsible thing would be to throw it away and forget about the strange woman, with her talk of research collectives and chosen people. But as he packed up his books and headed home, Jake found himself slipping the paper into his wallet instead. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Luna's words and the way she had seemed to see something in him that he didn't see in himself. For the first time in months, Jake felt like something interesting might be about to happen in his life. The question was whether he was brave enough to find out what it was. Jake spent the entire next day thinking about Luna's invitation. During his morning lecture about stellar formation, he found himself doodling the strange symbols from her note. Instead of taking proper notes, his professor's voice faded into background noise as he wondered what kind of research collective met at midnight. Tom noticed his distraction immediately when Jake returned to their shared apartment. You're acting weird today, Tom said, looking up from his video game. Weirder than usual. I mean, thanks for the vote of confidence, Jake replied, tossing his backpack onto the couch. I'm just thinking about something. Let me guess, you met someone at the coffee shop. Jake froze halfway to the kitchen. How did you know that? Because you've been checking your phone every 5 minutes. And you actually combed your hair this morning. Tom paused his game and turned around. So who is she? It's not like that, Jake said quickly. She's just someone interested in astronomy. We talked about research. You ate her. And now you're going to see her again? Jake pulled the piece of paper from his wallet, staring at the address. Maybe. She invited me to some kind of meeting with other researchers. What kind of meeting? I don't know exactly. She said they'd discuss theories that mainstream science isn't ready for. Tom raised an eyebrow. That sounds like either a conspiracy theory group or a cult. It's not a cult, Jake said, though he wasn't entirely sure why he felt so defensive. She's clearly educated. She knew things about my research that most professors don't even understand. Just be careful. Okay, you've been pretty isolated lately, and sometimes when we're lonely, we don't see red flags as clearly. Jake wanted to argue, but Tom's words hit uncomfortably close to home. He had been isolated, and he was lonely, but that didn't mean Luna was dangerous. Did it? By 11:30 that night. Jake had changed clothes 3 times and was pacing around. His room, the address Luna had given him, was for a house on the outskirts of town, in an area he'd never visited before. Part of him wanted to stay home, watch a movie, and pretend the whole thing had never happened. But another part of him, the part that had been craving something different and meaningful, pushed him toward the door. The drive took 20 minutes through increasingly rural roads. Jake's GPS led him down a winding lane lined with old oak trees that blocked most of the moonlight. When he finally reached the address, he found himself looking at a large Victorian house set back from the road, its windows glowing with warm, yellow light. Several cars were parked in the circular driveway, and Jake could hear the soft murmur of voices from inside. He sat in his car for a moment, gathering his courage, then walked up the front steps and knocked on the heavy wooden door. Luna answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting for him. She was dressed in a flowing white dress that seemed to shimmer in the porch light, and her silver jewelry caught the glow from inside the house. "Jake, I'm so glad you came." Her smile was radiant, and for a moment, all his doubts disappeared. "Come in, everyone's eager to meet you." The interior of the house was unlike anything Jake had expected. The walls were covered with star charts, astronomical photographs, and what appeared to be ancient artwork depicting celestial events. Soft instrumental music played in the background, and the air smelled faintly of incense. About 15 people were scattered around the large living room, all dressed in similar flowing clothes in various shades of white and silver. They were engaged in quiet conversations, their voices creating a gentle hum that felt almost musical. "Everyone," Luna announced, "this is Jake, the astronomer I told you about." The group turned toward him with warm smiles and welcoming gestures. Jake felt a wave of acceptance that he hadn't experienced in months. These people seemed genuinely interested in him, not just polite. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes approached him first. "Jake, welcome. I'm Dr. Alexander Thorne. Luna tells me you're working on exoplanet detection." "Yes, sir. It's my graduate research focus. Fascinating work. We're all passionate about understanding our place in the greater cosmos here." Dr. Thorne gestured around the room. "Would you like something to drink? We have herbal tea, fruit juice, nothing stronger than that." Jake accepted a cup of tea that tasted like nothing he'd ever had before, sweet and slightly floral with an aftertaste that lingered pleasantly. As he sipped it, Luna guided him round the room, introducing him to the other members of the group. There was Dr. Patricia Wells, a former NASA engineer who spoke knowledgeably about space exploration. Robert Kim, a mathematics professor who discussed complex equations with an ease that impressed Jake. Eleanor Rodriguez, an artist who created beautiful paintings of nebulae and galaxy formations. Each person he met seemed accomplished and intelligent, with genuine expertise in their fields. Jake began to relax, feeling foolish for Tom's warnings about cults and conspiracy theories. These were clearly educated, rational people who shared his love of astronomical science. "We call ourselves a Cosmic Awareness Society," Dr. Thorne explained as the group gathered in a circle. "We believe that traditional academic institutions place unnecessary limitations on what we're allowed to study and discuss." "What kind of limitations?" Jake asked. "Well, for example, the possibility that we're not alone in the universe. Mainstream science treats this as pure speculation, but we found evidence that suggests otherwise." Jake leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of evidence?" Dr. Thorne smiled and nodded to Luna, who disappeared into another room. She returned carrying a small wooden box that she set carefully on the coffee table. "Before we show you this, Doctor," Thorne said, "I want you to know that what you're about to see has been verified by multiple experts in our group. We're not asking you to believe anything on faith alone." Luna opened the box to reveal what appeared to be a small metallic object, about the size of a golf ball but with a surface that seemed to shift and change. As Jake looked at it, the metal had an unusual blue-green tint, and it seemed to generate its own faint light. "This was found 3 months ago in a field about 50 miles from here," Dr. Thorne explained. The composition is unlike anything in our periodic table. It doesn't match any known earthly materials. Jake stared at the object, his scientific mind racing. Have you had it analyzed by a laboratory? We've done extensive testing within our group, Dr. Thorne replied. But mainstream institutions wouldn't take our findings seriously. They're too invested in maintaining the status quo. As Jake continued to examine the object, he noticed that the other group members were watching him intently. Their faces showed a mixture of excitement and anticipation, as if they were waiting for him to have some kind of revelation. There's something else, Luna said softly. We've been receiving communications. Communications? Signals? Messages. They're not random. Someone, or something, is trying to make contact with us specifically. Dr. Thorne activated a small device that began playing a series of tones and pulses. The sounds were unlike anything Jake had heard before, complex, layered, and somehow melodic despite being clearly artificial. We've been documenting these transmissions for over a year, Dr. Thorne continued. The patterns are too sophisticated to be natural phenomena, and they're not coming from any known human source. Jake listened to the sounds, feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. His scientific training told him to be skeptical, to look for conventional explanations, but the evidence before him seemed to defy easy dismissal. What do you think they're trying to tell us? He asked. Luna moved closer to him, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. We think they're preparing us, getting us ready for something important. Ready for what? First contact, she said simply. And Jake, we think you're meant to be part of it. The room fell silent as everyone looked at him. Jake felt the weight of their expectations, the sense that he was standing at the threshold of something that would change his life forever. He just wasn't sure if that change would be wonderful or terrifying. Jake left the meeting that night feeling like his entire worldview had shifted. The drive home was a blur of racing thoughts and questions. The metallic object, the strange sounds, the way everyone had looked at him like he was somehow special. It all felt surreal. Tom was already asleep when Jake got back to their apartment, which was probably for the best. Jake wasn't sure how he would explain what had happened, or even if he should try. He spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The next few days passed in a haze. Jake found it impossible to concentrate on his regular coursework during lectures. His mind wandered to the conversations with the Cosmic Awareness Society. The professors droning on about conventional astronomy seemed suddenly limited and narrow-minded. Luna started texting him regularly. At first, the messages were simple check-ins about how he was feeling after the meeting, but gradually, they became more personal and frequent. Thinking about you. Read one message that arrived during his Thursday morning class. Hope you're ready for the next step. Jake stared at his phone, wondering what she meant by next step. Before he could respond, another message appeared. Can you meet me tonight? There's something important I need to show you, something just for you. That evening, Jake found himself walking up to Luna's apartment building. She lived in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of place that attracted creative types and people who preferred to live outside mainstream society. Luna answered the door wearing a simple black dress that somehow made her silver jewelry stand out. Even more, her apartment was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls were covered with star charts and astronomical photographs, but mixed in were paintings of strange symbols and what appeared to be technical diagrams of unknown devices. Welcome to my space, Luna said, leading him inside. I wanted you to see where I do my real work. The living room was filled with unusual objects, crystals arranged in geometric patterns, books written in languages Jake didn't recognize, and several devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Luna, what is all this stuff? Tools, she said simply, for communication, for understanding, for preparing. Preparing for what? Luna moved closer to him, her eyes intense and focused. Jake, what I'm about to tell you will sound strange, but I need you to trust me. The beings who have been contacting us, they don't just want to communicate with humanity in general. They choose specific individuals to serve as bridges between our worlds. Jake felt a flutter of unease. What do you mean? Bridges. They need people who can help them understand human behavior, human emotions, human connections. Luna reached out and touched his arm gently. They've been watching you, Jake, even before we met. They guided me to you? That's impossible, is it? Luna walked over to a table covered with photographs. These are pictures taken near your apartment building over the past month. Look at the light patterns in the sky. Jake examined the photos. At first, they just looked like normal nighttime shots of the city. But as he looked closer, he began to notice unusual light formations that seemed to appear repeatedly in the same areas. These could be anything, Jake said, though his voice lacked conviction. Airplane lights, satellites, camera artifacts. They could be, Luna agreed. But they're not, Jake. They've been studying you, learning about your routines, your personality, your capacity for growth. Jake set the photographs down, feeling overwhelmed. Why would they care about me? I'm just a graduate student. Because you have something they need to understand. The ability to form deep emotional connections. They want to learn about human bonding, human trust, human vulnerability. Luna moved to another part of the room and began lighting candles arranged in a specific pattern. The flickering light created strange shadows on the walls, making the symbols and diagrams seem to move and shift. There are rituals, Luna continued. Ceremonies that help facilitate the connection between their world and ours. They're not like human customs. They require complete trust, complete openness. What kind of rituals? Luna turned back to him, her face serious. They need to study human vulnerability, the way we surrender control, the way we trust each other. Completely, it's foreign to them, and they need to understand it. She walked over to a cabinet and pulled out what appeared to be lengths of silk rope. In various colors, the material seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, and Jake noticed that. The texture looked unusual, almost like it was woven from something other than normal silk. These are made from materials they provided, Luna explained. They're designed to create a specific energy field that enhances the connection between dimensions. Jake stared at the ropes, feeling a mix of curiosity and alarm. What exactly are you suggesting? A trust exercise. A way for them to observe human bonding behavior through our connection. Luna's voice was gentle but insistent. You would allow me to secure your hands, just temporarily, while we perform the communication ritual. Luna, I don't think. I know it sounds strange, she interrupted. But Jake, this is bigger than both of us. We're talking about the future of human-alien relations. The beings have chosen us specifically for this purpose. Jake looked around the apartment, taking in all the strange objects and symbols. Part of him wanted to leave immediately, to go back to his normal life of textbooks and lectures. But another part of him, the part that had been lonely and searching for something meaningful, was drawn to the idea of being chosen for something important. It's just a trust exercise, he asked. Exactly. Nothing more. I would never hurt you, Jake. I care about you too much for that. The way she said it made Jake's chest tighten. It had been so long since anyone had expressed genuine care for him. Luna seemed to understand him in a way that no one else did. How long would it take? Maybe an hour. We perform the ritual, they'd observe our connection, and then we'd be done. You'd be helping to bridge two worlds, Jake. You'd be part of something historic. Jake found himself nodding before he fully realized what he was agreeing to. Okay? But if I get uncomfortable, we stop immediately. Of course, Luna said, her smile radiant. I told you they chose well. You have such a trusting spirit. She began arranging the silk ropes in a specific pattern, explaining that the configuration was important for creating the proper energy field. Jake watched her work, noting how focused and precise her movements were. Just sit here, Luna said, indicating a chair in the center of the room. And remember, this is about trust, about showing them how humans can be vulnerable with each other. As Jake settled into the chair, he noticed that Luna had started speaking in a low, rhythmic tone. The words didn't sound like any language he recognized, but they had a hypnotic quality that made him feel strangely relaxed. Just breathe, Luna said, beginning to secure the silk around his wrists. Let yourself trust the process. Trust me. The Material felt strange against his skin, almost warm and slightly tingling. Jake told himself it was just his imagination, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening. "Luna," he said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears, "I feel weird. That's normal." She replied, continuing her work. The materials are designed to create a specific state of consciousness. It helps facilitate the connection. Jake wanted to ask more questions, but found that his thoughts were becoming fuzzy and disorganized. The candlelight seemed brighter, and Luna's voice seemed to be coming from very far away. "Perfect," Luna said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now we can begin the real communication." Jake tried to respond, but found that speaking required more effort than it should have. Something was definitely wrong, but he couldn't quite focus enough to figure out what it was. Luna began moving around the room, adjusting objects and continuing her strange chanting. Jake watched her through increasingly heavy eyelids, wondering what he had gotten himself into and whether he would be able to get out of it. Jake woke up in his own bed with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and his wrists were sore. When he looked down, he could see faint red marks where the silk ropes had been. The clock on his nightstand showed to 30 p.m. He lost almost an entire day. "Jake, you're finally awake." Tom burst into the room, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "Dude, I've been worried sick. You've been sleeping for like 14 hours. What happened?" Jake tried to sit up, but the room spun slightly. "How did I get home? I was hoping you could tell me. I found you passed out on the couch this morning when I got back from my early class. You were fully dressed and mumbling something about aliens and trust exercises." The memories came flooding back in fragments. Luna's apartment, the candles, the strange ropes, her voice chanting in that unknown language. But everything after that was a complete blank. "I need to call Luna," Jake said, reaching for his phone. "Who's Luna?" "The woman I told you about. The one from the astronomy group." Tom sat down on the edge of the bed, his expression serious. "Jake, I think something bad happened to you last night. You should probably go to the hospital." "I'm fine," Jake insisted, though he wasn't sure that was true. "I just need to understand what happened during the ritual." "Ritual?" Tom's voice rose. "What kind of ritual?" Before Jake could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from Luna. "Hope you're feeling better. The connection was amazing. Can't wait to do it again soon." Jake stared at the message, feeling a chill run down his spine. Something about her casual tone felt wrong, like she was talking about a normal social event rather than whatever had happened in her apartment. "I'm calling campus security," Tom said, pulling out his own phone. "Wait," Jake grabbed his arm. "Let me figure out what happened first. Maybe I'm overreacting." But deep down, Jake knew he wasn't overreacting. The lost time, the soreness, the way Luna seemed so casual about everything, it all pointed to something being seriously wrong. Over the next few days, Jake tried to piece together what had happened. He returned to the coffee shop where he'd first met Luna, hoping to find her there. Instead, he struck up a conversation with the barista, a college student named Kevin who worked the evening shift. "Oh yeah, I remember her," Kevin said when Jake described Luna. "She used to come in here all the time, but we haven't seen her in months. She always gave me the creeps, to be honest." "Why?" "She would sit in the corner and stare at people for hours, not reading or studying, just watching. And she always asked weird questions about the regular customers, what time they came in, if they seemed lonely. Stuff like that." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Did she ask about anyone specific?" "Actually, yeah. She was really interested in you. Asked about your schedule, whether you always sat alone, if you seemed like you were going through a tough time." The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. Luna hadn't approached him randomly. She had been watching him, studying him, waiting for the right moment to make contact. That evening, Jake decided to drive back to Luna's apartment building. He needed answers, and he needed them now. But when he arrived, he found that the building manager had never heard of anyone named Luna living there. "Apartment 4B has been empty for 3 months, the manager said, checking his records. We're Renovating it for new tenants. That's impossible. I was there 3 nights ago. The manager looked at Jake with concern. Son, are you feeling all right? Nobody's been in that apartment since the last tenant moved out. Jake insisted on seeing the apartment. The manager reluctantly agreed, leading him upstairs with a master key. When they opened the door, Jake found himself staring at a completely empty space. No furniture, no star charts, no strange devices. Just bare walls and dust-covered floors. See? Empty, the manager said. Look, if you're having some kind of mental health issue. There's a clinic down the street that I'm fine, Jake said. Quickly, though he was anything but fine. I must have been confused about the address. On the drive home, Jake's mind raced with possibilities. Had he imagined the entire thing? Was he having some kind of breakdown? But the marks on his wrists were real, and Tom had found him passed out. Something had definitely happened. The next day, Jake decided to do some research on the Cosmic Awareness Society. He searched online for Dr. Alexander Thorne and the other people he met at the meeting. What he found made his blood run cold. Dr. Alexander Thorne had indeed been a professor, but not the distinguished researcher he claimed to be. According to news articles from 2 years earlier, he'd been fired from his position at a small community college for inappropriate conduct with students and had subsequently disappeared. The other people Jake had met were harder to trace, but he eventually found some disturbing information. Patricia Wells wasn't a former NASA engineer. She was a patient who had escaped from a psychiatric facility 6 months ago. Robert Kim had been arrested for fraud involving fake academic credentials. As Jake dug deeper, a pattern emerged. These people were all connected through various mental health facilities and support groups. They weren't brilliant researchers exploring the frontiers of science. They were troubled individuals who had found each other and created an elaborate shared fantasy. But that still didn't explain Luna or what had happened in her apartment. Jake's breakthrough came when he remembered the Victorian house where the group had met. He drove out there, hoping to find some clues, and discovered that the house was actually a bed and breakfast that rented out space for private events. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, remembered the group well. Oh yes, they rented the main room for several evenings last month, paid in cash, which was unusual. But they seemed harmless enough, just a bunch of people interested in astronomy. Do you remember a woman named Luna? Dark hair, unusual jewelry? I remember her, but her name wasn't Luna. The woman who organized everything was named Linda Voss. She said she was putting together educational seminars about space science. Mrs. Patterson went on to explain that Linda had specifically asked about the rental schedule for other astronomy groups in the area. She'd been collecting information about local stargazing clubs and university astronomy departments for weeks. She seemed very interested in finding young people who were studying the subject. Mrs. Patterson added, said she wanted to inspire the next generation of scientists. Jake felt sick. Everything had been carefully planned. Luna or Linda had been targeting astronomy students, probably looking for someone vulnerable and isolated, someone exactly like him. When Jake got home, he found Tom waiting for him with a serious expression. We need to talk, Tom said. I've been doing some research of my own. Tom had contacted the university's counseling center and spoken with a counselor about Jake's recent behavior. The counselor had asked him to describe everything that had happened and had then shared some alarming information. She said there's been a pattern of astronomy students reporting similar experiences over the past year. Tom explained strange meetings, unusual people claiming to be researchers, incidents of lost time and memory gaps. How many students? At least 6 that they know of, and Jake, 2 of them ended up in the hospital. One was found unconscious in a park with no memory of how he got there. Another was discovered in his car on the side of the highway, dehydrated and confused. Jake sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. He wasn't Luna's first target, and he probably wouldn't be her last. There's more, Tom continued. The counselor thinks the group might be using drugs to make people more compliant and suggestible. That would explain your memory loss and the way you've been acting lately. Jake thought about the strange tea he'd drunk at the meeting, the way his thoughts had become fuzzy in Luna's apartment. It all made horrible sense. I need to report this to the police, Jake said. Already done. I called them this morning after talking to the counselor. They want to speak with you as soon as possible. That evening, Jake sat in a police station telling his story to Detective Rodriguez. She listened carefully, taking detailed notes and asking specific questions about Luna's appearance, the location of her supposed apartment, and the other members of the group. You're not the first person to report something like this, Detective Rodriguez said when Jake finished. We've been investigating a group that targets college students, particularly those studying science or technology. They use elaborate stories about alien contact and special research to lure people in. But why? What do they want? Control. Power. Some of them genuinely believe their own stories, while others are just predators looking for vulnerable victims. Either way, they're dangerous. Detective Rodriguez explained that the police had been trying to track down Linda Voss for months. She used different names and moved frequently, making her difficult to catch. But Jake's detailed account might finally give them the leads they needed. In the meantime, the detective said, I want you to be very careful. If she contacts you again, don't meet with her under any circumstances. Call us immediately. As Jake left the police station, he felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that he was finally getting help, and anger that he had been so easily manipulated. But mostly, he felt grateful that he had escaped before something worse happened. The next few weeks would be about recovery. About 2 weeks after his meeting with Detective Rodriguez, Jake was slowly starting to feel like himself again. The strange, foggy feeling in his head had cleared, and he was able to focus on his studies for the first time in over a month. The university counseling center had been incredibly helpful. Dr. Martinez, his assigned counselor, specialized in helping people recover from psychological manipulation and trauma. She explained that what Jake had experienced was actually quite common. Groups like this specifically target intelligent, curious people who are going through difficult times, Dr. Martinez said during one of their sessions. They look for individuals who are isolated, maybe dealing with loneliness or major life changes. It's not a reflection of your intelligence or judgment that you got caught up in this. Jake was grateful for her reassurance, but he still felt embarrassed about how easily he'd been fooled. I should have seen through it, he said. I'm supposed to be a scientist. I should have demanded better evidence. But they gave you evidence, Dr. Martinez pointed out. Fake evidence. But it was designed to look convincing. And they were exploiting your natural curiosity and desire for connection. That's not a weakness, Jake. That's what makes you human. Tom had been incredibly supportive throughout the whole ordeal. He'd helped Jake report the incident to the university, attended some counseling sessions with him, and made sure Jake wasn't isolating himself again. You know what the worst part is? Jake said one evening as they were making dinner together. I actually started to believe I was special, that I'd been chosen for something important. You are special, Tom replied, just not in the way those crazy people were claiming. You're special because you're a good person who cares about understanding the universe. Don't let this experience take that away from you. Jake's professors had been understanding when he explained that. He'd been dealing with a personal crisis. Dr. Chen, his thesis advisor, was particularly supportive. These kinds of groups have been around for decades, Dr. Chen said when Jake told him what had happened. They prey on young scientists because we're trained to be open to new ideas and possibilities. The key is learning to distinguish between healthy skepticism and closed-mindedness. The police investigation was making progress. Detective Rodriguez called Jake regularly with updates. They tracked Linda Voss to 3 other cities where similar incidents had been reported. In each case, she targeted college students studying astronomy, physics, or engineering. We think she genuinely believes her own story about alien contact, Detective Rodriguez explained, but that doesn't make her any less dangerous. She's been escalating her behavior, and we're concerned about what might happen to her next target. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after Jake's initial report. Linda had approached another astronomy student at a university 2 hours away, But this time, the student had been more cautious. When Linda invited him to a meeting, he brought friends and had recorded part of their conversation. "We arrested her yesterday," Detective Rodriguez told Jake over the phone. "She's being held on charges of fraud, assault, and administering controlled substances without consent." "What about the others?" "Dr. Thorne and the rest of the group. We're still tracking them down. Some of them are victims themselves, people with mental health issues, who got caught up in Linda's fantasy. Others are more actively involved in them. Deception. Either way, they won't be targeting any more students." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. For weeks, he'd been looking over his shoulder, worried that Luna might try to contact him again or that he might run into her somewhere. The trial was set for 6 months later. Jake would have to testify about his experiences, but Detective Rodriguez assured him that the prosecution had a strong case. The evidence included recordings, testimony from multiple victims, and chemical analysis of the substances Linda had been giving to her targets. "The tea you drank at that first meeting contained a mild sedative," Detective Rodriguez explained, "and what she used in her apartment was much stronger. It's designed to make people compliant and cause memory gaps. You're lucky you got out." When you did. As the months passed, Jake slowly rebuilt his confidence and sense of reality. He threw himself back into his astronomy research with renewed passion. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about critical thinking and the importance of maintaining connections with trusted friends. Dr. Martinez helped him understand that being manipulated didn't make him weak or gullible. You were dealing with professionals who had years of practice at psychological manipulation, she said. The fact that you eventually recognized something was wrong and sought help shows strength, not weakness. Jake started attending a support group for people who had been victims of cult-like organizations. He was surprised to learn how many others had similar experiences. People who had been targeted by groups claiming everything from secret government knowledge to mystical healing powers. "The common thread is always the same," explained David, another group member who had been caught up in a financial scam, disguised as an investment opportunity. "They find something you're passionate about or struggling with, and they promise you exclusive access to solutions or knowledge." The support group helped Jake realize that his experience, while traumatic, had also taught him valuable skills. He was now much better at recognizing manipulation tactics and maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships. When it came time for the trial, Jake was nervous but determined. He wanted to make sure Linda couldn't hurt anyone else. His testimony was detailed and clear, describing exactly how he'd been targeted and manipulated. Linda's defense attorney tried to argue that she genuinely believed her claims about alien contact and that she hadn't intended to harm anyone. But the prosecution presented evidence of her careful planning, her targeting of vulnerable individuals, and the documented harm she'd caused to multiple victims. The jury found Linda guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with a requirement to undergo psychological evaluation and treatment. After the trial, Jake felt like he could finally close this chapter of his life. He completed his thesis and was preparing to start a doctoral program at a prestigious university. His research on exoplanet detection had actually benefited from his experience. He developed a new appreciation for the importance of verification and peer review in scientific research in a weird way. Jake told Tom as they packed up their apartment for their respective moves to graduate school, "This whole thing made me a better scientist. I learned not to let my enthusiasm override my critical thinking. Plus, you learn to trust your friends when they're worried about you," Tom added with a grin. Jake laughed. "Yeah, that too. I should have listened to you from the beginning." A year later, Jake was thriving in his new program. He made friends with his fellow graduate students and had even started dating someone, a fellow astronomer named Amy, who shared his passion for space exploration but kept her feet firmly planted on Earth. One evening, as Jake was working late in the observatory, he received an unexpected email. It was from another victim of Linda's group, a student named Chris, who had been targeted before Jake but had never reported it. "I saw the news about the trial." Chris wrote, "I wanted to thank you for speaking up. I was too embarrassed to report what happened to me, but knowing that she's been stopped makes me feel like I can finally move on. Jake realized that his decision to come forward had helped more people than just himself. By refusing to let shame and embarrassment keep him silent, he potentially saved other students from going through similar experiences. Dr. Martinez had been right. There was strength in seeking help and speaking truth about difficult experiences. As Jake looked up at the stars through the observatory telescope, he felt the same sense of wonder that had drawn him to astronomy in the first place. But now that wonder was balanced with wisdom, and the knowledge that the real universe was far more amazing than any fantasy someone could invent, he was still passionate about the possibility of finding life elsewhere in the cosmos. But he would approach that search with proper scientific methods, peer review, and the support of legitimate institutions and trusted colleagues. The stars were still calling to him, but now Jake knew how to listen to them safely.